Korean Mafia boss agreed to one last blind date. The black girl who showed up changed his life forever. Min Jae had killed men for lesser offenses than being late to a meeting. But the woman who strolled into Seoul's most exclusive restaurant 20 minutes past 8, wearing a yellow dress that screamed main character energy and an expression that suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else, didn't even apologize. She just looked at him, looked at his 4 bodyguards, looked back at him, and said, "Your mama lied about your height on that profile." Hello, family. New story just dropped. Make sure you follow this page so you never miss the next twist. Drop your location. Where are you watching from today? The first thing people usually noticed about Min Jae was that he looked like he could end your life with a fountain pen and make it look like an accident. The second thing they noticed was the dragon tattoo crawling up his neck like it was trying to escape his expensive burgundy suit. The third thing, if they lived long enough to notice a third thing, was that his eyes were colder than a Seoul winter, the kind of cold that suggested he'd seen things that would make normal people check themselves into therapy. Tonight, those eyes were fixed on his whiskey glass like it held the answers to life's most pressing questions. Specifically, how had his life come to this? 27 blind dates. 27 excruciating evenings of making small talk with women who either wanted to fix him, feared him, or saw him as a particularly dangerous Instagram opportunity. 27 times he'd sat in rooms like this. Private, exclusive, the kind of place where the waitstaff signed NDAs and pretended he was a normal man looking for normal things like love and companionship, instead of what he actually was. The head of the Biko clan, Seoul's most profitable criminal organization, with blood on his hands, and a mother who refused to accept that her son's soulmate probably didn't exist. His second-in-command, Jun, stood by the door like a well-dressed gargoyle, trying not to look amused. Jun had been with him since they were teenagers running protection rackets in Gangnam. He'd taken 2 bullets from Min Jae, helped him bury 3 bodies, and never once questioned an order. But even Jun's loyalty had limits, and apparently those limits included watching his boss get emotionally destroyed by his 4'11" mother on a weekly basis. "Boss," Jun said carefully, "your mother said the woman's flight landed at noon. Maybe there was traffic. There's always traffic in Seoul. She's not coming." Min Jae checked his Patek Philippe, a gift from a Japanese arms dealer who'd later mysteriously disappeared, and felt something like relief flood his chest. "Give it 10 more minutes, then we leave. I'll tell mother the woman stood me up. That should buy me at least a month of peace. Your mother will just find another." The door slid open. Min Jae didn't look up. He'd perfected this routine over 27 iterations. The disinterested glance, the rehearsed apology, the generous cash offer to make the evening disappear from both their memories. He was opening his mouth to deliver his standard speech when a voice cut through the room like a knife through silk. "Boy, I didn't fly 13 hours from Atlanta to listen to your tragic villain monologue." His head snapped up so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. She stood in the doorway like she'd personally declared war on subtlety. The yellow dress hugged curves that had no business being that distracting. Her box braids cascaded over one shoulder in a waterfall of precision and attitude, and her dark eyes held an expression that suggested she was 3 seconds from throwing her designer purse at his head and posting the video on TikTok. American, black, and looking at him like he was an inconvenient speed bump on her way to something actually interesting. Min Jae felt his brain short-circuit. In his world, people didn't look at him like that. People looked at him with fear, respect, or the careful neutrality of those who'd heard the rumors and believed them. This woman was looking at him like he was a mediocre Yelp review she was considering leaving 1 star. "I'm Nia," she said, dropping into the chair across from him with zero ceremony, zero fear, and zero regard for the fact that Jun's hand had instinctively moved toward his shoulder holster. "And your mama paid for my first-class ticket, so we're doing this. Also, I was promised Korean barbecue, and I've been watching mukbang videos for 6 months, so somebody better start grilling something before I get cranky." Jun's hand froze mid-reach. His eyes, wide with something between shock and awe, flickered to Min Jae for direction. Min Jae couldn't respond. His mouth had apparently forgotten how to form words. This woman, This stranger who'd just invaded his carefully controlled evening had mentioned his mother like they were old friends, had ignored his reputation like it was irrelevant gossip, and was now scanning the menu with the focused intensity of a general planning a military campaign. My mother paid for your ticket. The words came out strangled, like his vocal cords were as confused as the rest of him. Hmm. Nia didn't look up from the menu. Found me through some international matchmaking app. Apparently, you need someone who won't be impressed by your brooding energy. She made air quotes, somehow managing to make the gesture look both dismissive and accurate. Her words, I told her I deal with entitled men every day. I'm a high school vice principal in Atlanta. You don't scare me. Something cracked in Min Jae's chest. Not his ribs, though it felt physical enough. Maybe it was the carefully constructed wall he'd built around anything resembling genuine human emotion. Maybe it was his sanity. Maybe it was the universe's way of telling him his mother had finally won. He studied her, really studied her, the way she held herself, like she'd walked in a battle before and won. The slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she wasn't as fearless as she pretended, but was committed to the performance anyway. The way her eyes, dark, intelligent, assessing, kept flickering between him and the menu, like she was simultaneously deciding what to eat and whether he was worth the jet lag. You realize who I am? He kept his voice low, dangerous. The voice that made hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. Nia looked up, meeting his gaze without a flicker of intimidation. Yeah, some crime boss with a god complex, and probably a tragic backstory involving a dead parent and a bunch of revenge plots. Cool. You realize I just broke up a fight between two 17-year-old boys over a TikTok girl yesterday? I pulled a butterfly knife out of a Hello Kitty backpack, Min Jae. A butterfly knife. From a backpack with a bow on it. June made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Min Jae shot him a look that promised emotions and possible bodily harm. But June just shrugged, his expression clearly saying, Boss, I like her. The terrifying part? Min Jae liked her too. For the first time in a decade, since he'd taken over the clan, since he'd gotten his hands bloody, since he'd become the thing his father had groomed him to be, Min Jae felt something shift. Not softness. He didn't do soft. But interest, curiosity, the dangerous kind that got men in his position killed or married. And he wasn't sure which was worse. So, Nia said, finally setting down the menu with a decisive nod, are we ordering, or are you going to keep doing that intense staring thing? Because I'm hungry, you're pretty but not that pretty. And your boy over there, she nodded toward June, looks like he's about to have an aneurysm. Min Jae realized he was smiling. Actually smiling. The kind of smile that used his entire face, not just the practiced corporate version he deployed at meetings with politicians and smugglers. He signaled the waitstaff, watched Nia's eyes light up as the grill was prepared, and made a decision that would either be the best or worst choice of his criminal career. He was keeping her. Can you feel the tension building? Make sure to follow for the next chapter, and tell me which country you're watching from. I want to see all my story lovers worldwide. Nia Thompson had made exactly 3 genuinely questionable decisions in her 31 years of life. The first was getting bangs in 2019, a dark time she refused to discuss. The second was dating a man named Trevor who'd unironically called himself a creative entrepreneur while living in her apartment rent-free. The third was accepting a first-class ticket to Seoul from a tiny Korean woman she'd met on a video call, who'd promised her son was successful, handsome, and only a little bit dramatic. Mrs. Choi had not mentioned the neck tattoos, or the bodyguards, or the fact that her son looked like a K-drama villain who'd walked off set and decided to make crime his full-time personality. But Nia had survived 14 years in the American public school system, rising from teacher to vice principal at one of Atlanta's most challenging high schools. She'd stared down gang members, talked armed teenagers off ledges, and once convinced a mother not to fight another mother in the parking lot over a stolen TikTok dance. A pretty crime boss with commitment issues and generational trauma. That was basically a Tuesday. So, she said, wrapping lettuce around perfectly grilled meat with the precision of someone who'd studied YouTube tutorials, your mother said you run an import-export business. I'm assuming the import is illegal weapons and the export is people who ask too many questions. Min Jae choked on his soju. Actually choked. June rushed forward, but Min Jae waved him off, coughing into his napkin while his eyes watered. When he recovered, he was staring at her like she'd just solved the equation that had been bothering him for years. He paused, searching for words. Direct. Baby, I have 847 teenagers to manage and exactly zero patience for nonsense. You can either tell me the truth, or we can play this cute little game where you pretend you're a businessman and I pretend I believe you. She popped the Sam in her mouth, closed her eyes, and made a sound that was borderline inappropriate for public dining. Oh my God, this is what I imagine heaven tastes like. Min Jae felt something dangerous stir in his chest. Want, not the simple kind. He did plenty of that over the years, transactions that ended when the sun came up. This was different, complicated, the kind that got men like him killed because they started caring about something other than survival and profit. My father built an organization, he said carefully, watching her reaction. I inherited it. We control most of the underground economy in Seoul. Protection, information, some less legal ventures. I've killed people. Order more killed. I'm not a good man, Nia. She looked at him, really looked at him, while chewing thoughtfully. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. She reached for more meat. You think I didn't Google you? Min Jae Biko clan brings up exactly 3 news articles, all in Korean, all carefully worded to avoid defamation lawsuits. But I read between the lines. I knew what I was walking into. Then why did you come? Because your mother offered me a free trip to Korea, and I just broke up with a man who tried to convince me that exposure was valid payment for letting him live in my house. She fixed him with a stare that could crack concrete. Also, because she showed me your picture, and I thought, that man looks like he needs someone to tell him his problems aren't special. Turns out I was right. Ju made another sound, definitely a laugh this time. Min Jae shot him a look that promised reassignment to their Busan operations, which everyone knew was code for counting inventory in a warehouse for 6 months. You're insane, Min Jae said, but there was admiration in his voice. No, I'm exhausted. There's a difference. Nia leaned back, studying him with those sharp, assessing eyes. Look, here's the deal. I'm here for 2 weeks. Your mother paid for a hotel, gave me a tourist itinerary, and told me to fix you. I'm not fixing anybody. I do that for a living, and I'm on vacation. But I will eat Korean food, see some temples, and tolerate your brooding if you make it worth my while. Worth your while? Yeah. Entertain me. Show me Seoul. Tell me your tragic backstory. Maybe smile more than once a decade. She paused, a sly grin crossing her face. And if you're really nice, I might let you take me to that palace I saw on Instagram. The one with all the pretty buildings. Min Jae felt himself smiling again. Twice in one night. June was definitely having that aneurysm now. Gyeongbokgung Palace, he said. I'll arrange it. Perfect. Nia raised her soju glass. To questionable life choices and mothers who meddle. Min Jae raised his glass, clinked it against hers, and wondered if this was how men in his position fell. Not to bullets or betrayal, but to a woman in a yellow dress who refused to be impressed by anything except perfectly grilled meat and historical architecture. Outside the restaurant, Seoul glittered like scattered diamonds. Inside, something shifted in the air between them. Dangerous, electric, inevitable. June caught his eye and mouth. Boss, you're in trouble. Min Jae knew. He just didn't care anymore. The next morning, Min Jae woke up to 17 missed calls from his mother, 6 texts from June asking if he'd been kidnapped, and 1 message from an unknown number that read, Your mother gave me your contact. I need coffee and directions to a place that won't judge me for ordering in English. Also, do y'all have grits here? Probably not. Sad. He stared at his phone for a full minute, lying in his king-size bed in a penthouse that overlooked the Han River, trying to remember the last time someone had texted him about breakfast. Most of his messages were coded updates about shipments, territorial disputes, or someone needing permission to handle a problem, which was always code for can I make this person disappear? Nia Thompson was texting him about grits. He typed back, no grits. Coffee in 30 minutes. I'll send a car. Her response was immediate. I don't do mysterious black cars, crime boss. That's how horror movies start. Send me an address, and I'll Uber. Despite himself, Min Jae laughed. Then he called June. Boss. June answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted. Please tell me you didn't kill the American woman. Your mother will actually murder us both. I need you to prepare the cafe on Gangnam Boulevard, the one we own. Clear it out. Silence. Then, you're taking her to our money laundering front? It's also a legitimate cafe, June. They make excellent coffee. Min Jae was already getting dressed, choosing a simple black sweater instead of his usual suit. Nia had called his tie middle management energy, and the insult still stung. And don't clear it completely. Make it look natural. Just ensure privacy. Boss, you're acting weird. I'm acting hospitable. You once made a Russian arms dealer wait 3 hours because he showed up 2 minutes late. Now you're waking up early for coffee with a woman who roasted you about your height. Are you refusing the assignment? June sighed. Already on it. But for the record, I'm documenting this personality change for future blackmail purposes. 40 minutes later, Min Jae sat in a corner booth of Cafe Luna, watching Nia walk through the door in ripped jeans, an oversized Spelman College hoodie, and sneakers that had clearly walked a few thousand miles. She looked nothing like the woman from last night. No dress, no heels, no armor. Just comfortable, real, and somehow even more dangerous to his carefully maintained emotional distance. She spotted him immediately and headed over, dropping into the seat with the same zero-ceremony energy from the restaurant. You own this place, don't you? What makes you say that? Because everyone here is actively pretending not to stare at you. And that barista looked like he was going to cry when I walked in. She accepted the coffee menu from a nervous server, studied it, then looked up with narrowed eyes. Also, nobody else is here. You cleared it out. I ensured privacy. You cleared it out. She grinned, shaking her head. Man, you're extra. I respect it, but you're extra. Min Jae felt his carefully constructed intimidation factor crumbling like weak old bread. I thought you'd be more comfortable without an audience. That's actually thoughtful. She looked genuinely surprised. Okay, crime boss. You get points for that. She ordered an Americano and something called a croffle, which the server promised was life-changing. Once they were alone again, she leaned forward, elbows on the table. So real talk, what's your deal with your mother? Because she called me at 6 a.m. sole time to ask if you were behaving like a gentleman or if she needed to come down there. Min Jae groaned, a sound he hadn't made since he was a teenager getting lectured about his grades. My mother is persistent. Your mother is a whole tactical operation. She sent me a 15-page dossier about you, childhood photos, your favorite foods, that time you won a math competition in middle school. It was like a Wikipedia page written by someone with unlimited access and no boundaries. She did what? Oh, you didn't know? Nia pulled out her phone, scrolling. There's even a section titled, Why My Son Needs a Strong Woman. It includes bullet points and footnotes. Your mother used footnotes, Min Jae. He wanted to be horrified. You should be horrified. Instead, he was laughing, that deep, genuine laugh that Nia seemed to extract from him like a magician pulling rabbits from hats. She's trying to get me married, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. Has been for months. Your blind date number 28. 28. Nia's eyebrows shot up. Damn, what was wrong with the other 27? They either wanted to fix me, feared me, or saw me as content for their social media. And what do you think I see you as? Min Jae met her eyes. I don't know. That's what terrifies me. Nia smiled, soft, genuine, dangerous. Good. Keep guessing. If you're loving this drama so far, don't forget to tap follow to catch every twist. Also, tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story travels. The problem with Nia Thompson, Min Jae realized by day 3, was that she treated his criminal empire like an annoying personality quirk instead of a legitimate reason to maintain emotional distance. She'd somehow convinced him to play tour guide through Seoul, which meant he'd spent 72 hours doing things he hadn't done since before his father died. Walking through markets without bodyguards hovering 2 feet away, eating street food from vendors who definitely didn't know who he was, and yesterday, taking selfies at Gyeongbokgung Palace while Nia lectured him about Korean history she'd learned from a 3-hour YouTube deep dive on the plane. You're Korean and you didn't know that, she'd said, genuinely appalled when he'd admitted ignorance about some specific architectural detail. I was busy learning how to run a criminal organization, he'd replied dryly. Excuses. That's just excuses and poor time management. Now they sat on the steps of Iwa Mural Village, watching the sunset paint the city gold and amber, and Minjae felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The kind that made him nervous because peace, in his world, usually meant you weren't paying attention to the knife aimed at your back. So, Nia said, breaking the comfortable silence, when are you going to tell me about your father? The piece shattered like dropped glass. Min Jae's jaw tightened. Who said anything about my father? Baby, you've got dead parent trauma written all over you. Plus, your mother mentioned him exactly once in our video call. Got this look like someone had stabbed her, then changed the subject so fast I got whiplash. Nia wasn't looking at him, just watching the city stretch out below them. You don't have to talk about it, but I'm here if you want to. Min Jae had killed men for asking about his father. Well, not killed. That was inefficient, but he definitely made them regret their curiosity. Yet somehow, sitting here with this woman who'd invaded his life like a colorful natural disaster, the words came easier than they should. He died 4 months ago. Heart attack. The doctor said it was cholesterol and stress, but I think it was stubbornness. Min Jae stared at his hands that had signed death warrants, counted blood money, and never quite felt clean. He built everything from nothing, street gang to empire, and then he died eating samgyeopsal and watching a baseball game. That's actually kind of poetic. It's ridiculous. It's human. Nia finally looked at him, and her eyes held something that looked dangerously like understanding. My daddy died when I was 23. Stroke. He was a principal too. That's why I became one. Thought I could honor him by doing what he did. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Turns out I'm just trying to fix all the kids he couldn't save. Therapist says it's displacement of grief. I say it's Wednesday. Min Jae felt something crack open in his chest, the place where he kept all the things he couldn't afford to feel. Does it get easier? No, you just get better at pretending it does. She bumped his shoulder with hers. But having people around helps. Even annoying people who order you around and judge your tie choices. He smiled despite himself. You're not annoying. Liar. I'm extremely annoying. I pride myself on it. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the city lights flicker on like stars falling upward. Min Jae thought about his father's funeral, his mother's tears, the weight of an empire he'd never wanted but couldn't abandon. He thought about the 27 women who'd sat across from him, seeing either a monster or a wallet. And he thought about Nia, who somehow saw him as just a person, damaged, complicated, but human. My father told me something before he died. Min Jae heard himself say. He said, son, the empire will survive without you. But you won't survive without something worth living for besides the empire. Smart man. I didn't understand what he meant. I thought he was just sentimental. Dying makes people say strange things. And now, Min Jae looked at her, really looked at her. The way the sunset caught in her eyes, the gentle curve of her smile, the strength in her posture that came from years of fighting battles nobody thanked her for. Now I'm starting to understand. Nia held his gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then her phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted, hardened in a way he recognized because he wore the same mask daily. Everything okay? Just work drama. One of my students got arrested back home. His mom's texting me, asking if I can help. She looked torn, guilty. I'm on vacation. I shouldn't help him, Min Jae said immediately. That's what you do. She smiled, sad, grateful, beautiful. That's what I do. And Min Jae realized, with the slow horror of a man watching his own carefully constructed walls crumble, that he was absolutely, completely, catastrophically falling for her. June was right. He was in so much trouble. The thing about happiness, Min Jae had learned from a lifetime in the underworld, was that it made you careless, soft, vulnerable. And vulnerability in his world was just another word for target painted on your back in neon letters. You should have seen it coming. Day 7 with Nia had been perfect, Too perfect. They'd spent the afternoon at Buckshin Hannock Village, Nia insisting on taking photos in front of every traditional house while lecturing him about cultural preservation. She'd held his hand while navigating the narrow streets, her fingers interlaced with his like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for a few hours, Min Jae had let himself forget what he was. That's when his phone rang. June's name flashing on the screen like a warning siren. Boss, we have a situation. Min Jae's blood went cold. June only used that tone for two things, betrayal or bloodshed. What kind of situation? The Huang faction. They hit one of our warehouses in Incheon. 3 of our guys are dead, and they left a message. June paused, and Min Jae could hear the anger vibrating through the line. They know about the American woman. The world tilted sideways. What did you say? They know about her, boss. They're asking questions, making threats. Huang sent word that if you don't meet with him tonight, alone, June's voice cracked slightly. He'll make her disappearance look like an accident. Min Jae's vision went red. The Huang faction had been circling for months, testing boundaries, waiting for weakness. And he'd given them exactly what they needed, something he cared about. Someone. Where is she now? At the hotel. I've got 2 men outside her room, but boss, get her somewhere safe. Somewhere even I don't know about. Do it now. His voice was ice, the same tone he used before ordering executions. And tell Huang I'll meet him, but on my terms, my location. He ended the call and turned to find Nia watching him with those sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. That sounded bad, she said carefully. You need to leave Seoul. Tonight. Excuse me. There are people who want to hurt me. They know about you. They'll use you to get to me. Min Jae was already texting June, arranging protection, calculating exits. I'm putting you on the next flight to Atlanta. Absolutely not. He looked up, stunned. What? Nia stepped closer, her expression fierce. You think I've survived 14 years dealing with gang violence, school shootings, and teenagers with weapons because I run when things get dangerous? Baby, I've had guns pulled on me by 16-year-olds. I've talked down gang members twice your size. You don't get to make decisions for me. This is different. No, it's not. It's just a different neighborhood with the same tired men thinking violence solves problems. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. So whatever you're planning, whatever meeting you're about to walk into like some sacrificial lamb, I'm going to need you to be smarter than that. Min Jae had spent his entire adult life being the scariest person in any room. But looking at Nia Thompson, all 5'6" of her, vibrating with righteous fury and stubborn loyalty, he realized something terrifying. He'd met his match, and she wasn't backing down. The abandoned warehouse in Songdo smelled like rust, salt water, and bad decisions. Min Jae stood in the center of the concrete floor, surrounded by shadows that probably contained guns, facing Park Hwang, a man who'd built his reputation on cruelty and had the smile of someone who enjoyed watching things burn. The great Min Jae, Hwang said, his voice echoing off metal beams. Finally crawling out from behind his mother's skirts and his pretty American distraction. Min Jae's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Around them, Hwang's men positioned themselves strategically, 12 that he could count, probably more in the rafters. June was outside with their crew, ready to storm in if things went sideways. The plan was simple: negotiate, de-escalate, and keep Nia's name out of this forever. You wanted to talk, Min Jae said coldly. So talk. I want Gangnam. The clubs, the protection contracts, everything. You give me that, and maybe your little girlfriend gets to fly home with all her pretty parts intact. Hwang's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Or maybe I take Gangnam anyway and send her back to Atlanta in pieces. Either way works for me. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Min Jae felt the familiar coldness settling over him. The same feeling he got before violence became inevitable. His hand moved slightly toward the gun at his back. That's when the warehouse door burst open with a crash that echoed like thunder. Every gun in the building swung toward the entrance. Nia Thompson stood in the doorway, backlit by streetlights, holding her phone up like a weapon. Behind her, impossibly, were June and what looked like half of Min Jae's crew, plus some faces he didn't recognize. "World star," she shouted into the warehouse, her voice amplified by the concrete. "Y'all want to threaten people? Cool. But I've got this whole conversation recorded and uploading to 3 different cloud services. I've also got your face, your license plate, and a very detailed message already drafted to the Seoul Metropolitan Police about a warehouse full of illegal weapons." The silence was deafening. Huang's smile disappeared. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Nia actually walked forward into a room full of armed criminals, with the confidence of someone who'd faced down worse and lived to write the incident report. "Because I'm a vice principal, honey. I document everything. It's literally my job. And that little speech about sending me home in pieces, that's terroristic threatening. I've got timestamps, audio quality, and enough evidence to make your life very complicated. If you think the police, oh, I'm not just talking about the police." Nia's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm talking about posting this on every social media platform, sending it to every news outlet, and making you Seoul's most famous criminal. You'll be a meme by tomorrow. Wannabe gangster threatens American teacher." That's the headline. Your reputation? Done. Your business? Compromised. Your ability to operate in the shadows? Gone. Min Jae stared at her, somewhere between horrified and deeply impressed. She just threatened a crime lord with social media exposure and somehow made it more terrifying than any gun. Huang looked around at his men, clearly calculating odds. The problem with Nia's threat wasn't just the police, it was visibility. The moment a criminal became famous, became a face instead of shadow, they became useless. Liability. Target practice for every ambitious prosecutor and rival gang. "This isn't over," Huang finally said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "Actually," Min Jae said, finding his voice, "it is. Because if anything happens to her, this recording goes live automatically. And then you won't just be dealing with the police. You'll be dealing with every criminal organization in Seoul who values discretion over your petty territorial nonsense. You become the liability, Huang, not me." The standoff stretched for an eternity, tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Huang jerked his head toward the exit. His men filed out slowly, keeping weapons visible, maintaining whatever dignity they could salvage. When the warehouse finally emptied, Min Jae turned to Nia, who was still holding her phone up, shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "That was the stupidest, bravest, most insane thing I've ever witnessed," he said. "I told you," she replied, her voice wavering only slightly. "I don't run." June appeared beside them, grinning wider than Min Jae had seen in years. "Boss, I really like her." "Shut up, June." But Min Jae was smiling too, because Nia Thompson had walked into a warehouse full of armed criminals, threatened a gang leader with viral videos and cloud storage, and somehow emerged victorious. She hadn't saved him with violence or money or connections. She'd saved him with documentation and the terror of public accountability. His father had been right. The empire would survive without him. But he wouldn't survive without something, someone, worth living for besides the empire. He'd found her, and she wore yellow dresses, quoted Principal's handbook procedure, and had absolutely no respect for the traditional rules of gang warfare. "So," Nia said, finally lowering her phone, "can we get Korean fried chicken now? Because I definitely need comfort food after that. And you're buying." Min Jae laughed, deep, genuine, free. "Anything you want." "Good. Also, your mother called. She wants us for dinner tomorrow." And before you say no, Nia fixed him with that principal stare that had probably broken-hardened teenagers. "We're going. Because that woman paid for my ticket, and I don't ghost people who invest in me. That's just bad manners." June was actively crying with suppressed laughter now. Min Jae looked at this woman, this absolutely insane, brilliant, fearless woman who'd flown across the world and somehow decided he was worth fighting for. Worth saving. Worth building something real with, even if that something existed in the complicated space between her world and his. "Dinner with my mother it is," he said. "But fair warning, she's already planning our wedding." "Well," Nia said, slipping her hand into his, "at least someone in this relationship has a plan." And there, in an abandoned warehouse in Songdo, Surrounded by the evidence of his violent life and the promise of something different, Min Jae realized his 28th blind date had just become his last. Not because it failed, but because Nia Thompson, vice principal, chaos agent, documenter of crimes, and wearer of impractical yellow dresses, had looked at all of him, the blood and the business and the broken parts, and decided to stay anyway. Some battles were won with bullets. This one was won with bravery, box braids, and the sheer audacity of a woman who refused to let anyone, gang lords, dangerous men, or tragic backstories, write her ending for her. 3 months later, Min Jae would stand in his mother's living room, watching Nia argue with Mrs. Choi about wedding venues while eating kimchi straight from the container, and think. His father had been right about everything. The empire survived. But Min Jae, he was finally living. If you believe people deserve second chances at happiness, even complicated, tattooed crime bosses with trust issues, hit that subscribe button. Only bitter, cold-hearted trolls who've never felt real connection won't. Comment, everyone deserves love, if you're not siding with Huang and his violence first. Emotional growth, never energy. Let me know, would you have walked into that warehouse, or would you have been on the first flight home?